Let's look at the
Religion.
let's look at the religious side. Yeah, the religious side, of course. It's interesting that the religions of the world have climbed on board with sustainable development, climate change stuff, green economy. When I say they've climbed on board, I mean they have climbed on board. The Catholic, well, let's just start with the Pope. The Pope wrote an encyclical last summer on climate change. He took his encyclical and presented it to a joint session of the United Nations last fall. And the Catholic Church is sold out, lock, stock, and barrel to what I call green religion. And all the rest of them have too. And not just Christian, not just the Christian side of things, but everybody. You know, Islam, Buddhism, Shintoism, Hinduism, the whole gamut of world religions are bought into this. And in 2014, there was a big interfaith summit on climate change. Interfaith is that buzzword. It means all the different churches of the world and all the other religions of the world came. Everybody was represented. The World Council of Churches issued a press release after that conference was done. And here's what the World Council of Churches said, direct quote from their press release. There has never been such a large amount of religious environmental activity in one location in the history of the world. This week will mark a watershed in the history of religion. It will be the time that people remember as the time when the world's faiths declared themselves irrevocably as green faiths. Close quote. Yikes. Whoa.
Yeah, wow.
Say, okay, well, Isn't that interesting? All the religions of the world have declared themselves irrevocably as green faiths. And we see this trickling down even into the evangelical church today as well. You know, where people are all concerned about this stuff, and things like social justice now has trickled down on the backs of all this, because the United Nations is big on this, the whole concept of social justice. You hear it everywhere, and every one of their websites, social justice this, social justice that, and it travels on the back of you know, green stuff, sustainable development, stuff like that. Just incredible. So, yep, the world's religions have sold out to this whole thing. They're supporting the structure at this point. And it's even slipped down into the evangelical churches, many of them, as I said, as well. So that's a transformation that's taken place. And, well, okay, you can't do much about that. It's just the way it is. If your church is involved in any of this green stuff, you have two choices. You either go slap the pastor hard across the right cheek. Oh, just kidding. You either go slap your pastor and say, "What are you doing? Don't do this. This is wrong. No," and show him why it's wrong. Or you put your tennis shoes on and you run like crazy. I don't know. Your choice, I suppose. You can either stay and try and confront him or run. You probably won't do anything to change him, but maybe you feel a duty and a responsibility to tell them and confront them, because maybe you've been at that church for 20 years or 30 years, you know, and that's your family. And all of a sudden they changed. You didn't change, they changed.
Yeah. And you did an interview with Sheila Zelinsky. She's a friend of the show, and she wrote a book, The Green Gospel, where she gets into this a lot.
Yes. In my chapter, you understand my personal journey to understand reflexive law. It was just, using the word miraculous would be kind of cheap, but how I discovered reflexive law was just amazing, because I am not a lawyer. I wanted to be a lawyer when I was growing up, but I'm not a lawyer. But reflexive law was an alternative legal system, legal theory, that was developed back in the mid-1980s by a German scholar. And it spread like wildfire because it was a legal system that would be used to support sustainable development. With that's the economic system, technocracy, whatever. The old rule of law would never, ever, ever work for technocracy. There's all kinds of reasons why it wouldn't work, but it would not work. So the scholars came up with a new economic theory, and they called it reflexive law. And it's twisted. I'm not even going to try to tell you exactly what it is. It's twisted.
This is something I read this chapter 2 or 3 times, and I have a very light grasp of it, but it is
okay. Do you agree? It's twisted.
Oh, yeah. Very much so.
I know. Here's one statement from one of these scholars that just tells you what reflexive law is all about. This is a very interesting quote. This guy wrote, at the same time, sustainable development's broad sweep strains our intellectual grasp. This is my emphasis, okay? I can't help it. I'm not trying to imitate anybody, but you just got to say it this way, right? At the same time, sustainable development's broad sweep strains our intellectual grasp of its meaning and outruns the capacity of our current legal and political systems to channel society's activities towards its achievement. Just pause for a second. What balderdash, what audacity this guy would have to say something like this. It outruns the capacity of our current legal and political systems. Okay, out with the old, in with the new, okay? Then he goes on, quote, there is no doubt that sustainable development needs new paradigms to transform it from visionary rhetoric to a viable political goal, close quote. Did you catch that? What are they,
Absolutely.
what even the experts, what were they calling sustainable development? Visionary rhetoric.
Yeah.
You see, back in the day, 1973 to 1983, all of this stuff about sustainable development was just visionary rhetoric. Now, can I translate that?
Please do.
I won't be crude or rude. It's BS. That's all. It's just BS. Visionary rhetoric. It's nothing. It's talk. It's just a pipe dream in the sky. But they had to transform it. If they wanted to get there, they had to transform it into a viable political goal. Now, that required other things like propaganda, the United Nations, sustainable development, global warming, punishing the deniers, and all this other stuff. That's all in view here. But reflexive law was this new paradigm to transform it from visionary rhetoric to a viable political goal. Now, I came out of a farming community in California, and I've watched my farmer friends and some family and stuff like that get beat up by the eco movement because they get sued all the time over, some stupid little, two-toed snail darter or something is off in a corner of their property. Oh, you can't plow over there. You might hurt the little two-toed snail darter, and he'd been almost extinct for 1,000 years. It's like, okay, how can you get taken to court and whooped like a dog and lose pitifully and be punished and fined and in some cases arrested and put in jail over a two-toed snail darter or whatever the heck it was out on a corner of your property that you've been farming, you and your family, for 100 years successfully? Well, I'll tell you how they lost every single case in court, because the lawyers for the environmental lawsuits brought reflexive law along with them and applied it to their cases in court, and even the judges did not see the sleight of hand. They never saw it. Maybe some of them were participating with it, but most of them never saw it in the early days. They got schnookered. And once they started losing cases, the farmers just continued to lose cases, and the environmentalists just continued to win cases, and they've won virtually every stinking case for the last 40 years because of reflexive law. It was a new paradigm to transform sustainable development from visionary rhetoric to a viable political goal. I guess I get worked up about that, don't I?
Well, no, it is incredible, and it's interesting. In reading from in your book here, in the chapter we're talking about 7, transforming law, you write the following. You say that as rules are developed and added to other rules, what appeared chaotic is now supposed to have order and harmony. However, the thought of order from chaos is no better than Darwin's unproven theory that species evolve from less complex to more complex. The legal world today experiences more chaos than ever before. The problem with reflective law is that it cannot operate in a vacuum, as is suggested, but is at all times subject to those who control it. It is ripe for manipulation. Reflective law practitioners can thus direct discourse, the outcome, the rulemaking, in a very real sense, like the Old West vigilante concept of the local, self-appointed sheriff being judge, jury, and executioner.